Starting in 30 seconds.
Okay. Good evening, South Africans, and welcome to a very special broadcast of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. We are coming to you live from Emperor's Palace in Kempton Park, where the meeting of heads of state of Parliament of the Brics nations is scheduled to take place. We are broadcasting live across 30 community radio stations across the country, Parliament TV, and all Parliament social media platforms. My name is Masego Dlula, and I will be your host until 7 p.m. Tonight, we are looking at zooming into the Brics Parliamentary Forum meeting, which is scheduled to start tomorrow here in Kempton Park, and it is hosted by the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa. Please feel free to send your comments and questions to us via WhatsApp on 083-529-1888, and that number again is 083-529-1888. Tonight in studio, I will be talking to the National Assembly Deputy Speaker, Ntatele Tsenodi, and the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Sylvia Lucas. They will give us an overview of what this meeting that is scheduled to start tomorrow is all about. Just now, for background purposes, the Brics Parliamentary Forum is a structure made up of leaders of legislative organs of the Brics countries, which are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Since January this year, South Africa has been chairing the Brics, and currently it is playing host to all major Brics events and meetings, including the Brics Heads of State Summit that took place last month here also in Johannesburg. And now it is now hosting the Brics Parliamentary Forum, which is scheduled to start tomorrow. Good evening, Deputy Chairperson, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Masego, and good evening to your listeners and your viewers.
That is the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Ms. Sylvia Lucas. And also I have Ntatele Tsenodi. Welcome, Ntatele Tsenodi, to the show.
Good evening, ma'am, and good evening to your listeners.
And viewers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, we're going to start through and hit to the questions. Ms. Sylvia Lucas, most people have heard, or now following the meeting that happened in August, know about the Brics Heads of State structure. Now, this is sort of a new thing that's coming. Can you please explain to the viewers at home and our listeners how the bigger Brics Heads of State structure is related or connected to the Brics Parliamentary Forum?
Thank you very much, Masego. Let me first say that the Brics Parliamentary Forum is not new.
Yeah.
It is just taking a fresh approach
Okay.
in terms of how it is operating. This year that we have decided that we should have a long-standing event of the Brics Parliamentary Forum, because previously we used to meet at the sidelines of the Brics Heads of State event or at the sidelines of the Interparliamentary Union, where the last time we met, I still remember there was a meeting in Madrid, Spain, where we met as the Brics Parliamentary Forum, and with a specific focus on issues of gender-based violence and gender empowerment and gender representativity, particularly with a focus on women in Parliament. So it is not something new. It is just that the way we operated made us to be less significant in terms of the visibility and in terms of people being aware of the operations of the Brics Parliamentary Forum. That is why South Africa, since we assumed a chairpersonship, we also decided that since parliaments have got an oversight responsibility, and also we've got the responsibility to make sure that we endorse the treaties that are being signed by the different countries. And that is why Parliament will have to take that responsibility to make sure that people also get more, there is a more nuanced approach, and also that people get more information about the Brics Parliamentary Forums. Because in the same way that heads of state are meeting, heads of parliaments are also meeting, and then they are discussing in how are we going to drive oversight over the kind of decisions and over the kind of programs that are being initiated by the heads of state. So that is why I'm saying the Brics Parliamentary Forum is not necessarily something new. It's just that now this year, as South Africa being the host, we are taking a fresh approach to make sure that people become more aware of the operations of the Parliamentary Forum of the BRICS nations.
Okay, and what would you say are the main objectives of this structure? What is its main role, basically?
You must remember that states or governments operate within a legislative framework, and that legislation is being adopted and processed within Parliament. And also Parliament, they've got the responsibility of keeping the executive accountable. And also Parliament, they've got the responsibility of doing oversight over the executive. So in terms of that, and also like I already said, the kind of treaties, that is now the kind of agreements that is there between the different states, it's also parliaments of their countries endorse their treaties. So in terms of our oversight responsibility, and we need to make sure that in our oversight, particularly through our committees and through our work as Parliament, we actually build in oversight over the kind of agreements to see how it benefits the country, how it benefits the nation, and how it is being implemented by our governments.
Okay. Now, Ntatele Chisa, based on the background that May just gave us about this structure, what would you say have been the benefits of South Africa to belonging to such a structure? And besides just Parliament, just give us maybe how this is important for an ordinary South African who's just outside there.
Well, the first point I want to make is that once a decision is taken, for example, in our instance, that we are going to host BRICS, immediately any of our structures in the country, be it civil society, be it departments of government, can themselves in their specific sectors convene meetings such as has happened in South Africa. The Department of Higher Education organized a meeting of ministers, for example, from BRICS countries. And the business also held a business forum related to BRICS, looking at the agreements and then specifically looking at collaboration between South Africa and Africa. We do our work inside the Parliamentary Forum to increase benefits in our interaction as different parliaments. There are specific problems that are not unique to South Africa, that are unique to other countries as well. And so in our collaboration, we look at how did China raise 800 million people from poverty? What lessons can we learn from that? Brazil, what did Brazil do in an area in which we have an interest? So in similar manner, we learn from each other's practices and methods for using public resources to advance the interests we have. We often share resources as well in specific areas. We also come together, including in other multilateral formations. In other words, in other bodies of parliaments of the world, which seeks to solve these problems to advance the democratization, for example, of the institution that exists, the United Nations itself and its Security Council. Is an example of one matter that we have in common agreement inside BRICS, that it must be transformed to be more democratic, to include others. We can, because as a country we live in the neighborhoods in our own region, things that happen inside our countries also impact on others in our neighborhoods and vice versa. So this is why it is important to work together as different countries to consider common problems that affect our countries. And through that we benefit precisely from the wisdom of others in what they are doing and how they are doing it. Of course we adapt it for our own purposes. But that we are meeting with countries from around the world in a manner, one of the practical things is the reality that coming here is a huge political tourism factor. And so they pay resources from their countries in our own country, and for the period during which we are hosting this place here in this area, for example, this hotel is full of us, as an example, including our visitors. It's a very important tourism thing. What is significant about that from a tourist perspective is that they come as heads of institutions like ours, parliaments. When they see what's happening in South Africa, they come back later as visitors. And this is the ripple effect of meeting together like that. And so it increases, including working towards peace. There are conflicts in the world which require our collective energy to bring down peace, to accelerate development as a result of, because no development will take place if there are conflicts in our countries and continents.
You wanted to add something?
The one important thing for me that I would love to add is the fact of education, research and innovation.
Yeah.
Because on that scale, there are major kind of agreements and cooperation between BRICS countries and between other countries with South Africa, but in particularly the BRICS countries. Because if you look at the education perspective, for instance, I can mention an example. Currently, there is a open window for students, for postgraduate students from South Africa to apply to Russia for bursaries, for scholarships, bursaries, and from 2 years up to 4 years, which means it is in the context of our BRICS relationship that we can use that. And there is also a drive to make sure that there is a kind of a collaboration between the different universities, particularly in the mining and the metal industries, because you said what will be the benefits for ordinary South Africans. The issue that I would say that is just that we possibly don't give out enough information about the kind of opportunities that is available, because that is sometimes driven by government, but Parliament have got a role to play to make sure of whether this kind of agreements, if it is implemented, if it is actually like higher education that was mentioned by my colleague, if they actually use the opportunity to make sure that China is offering scholarships, Russia is offering scholarships. I mean, just to mention, but this too.
Yeah.
So how is this thing, how do it trickle down to our communities? But the benefits is definitely there. The agreements is there. It is just for us to make use of it. And by the way, this Parliamentary Forum is one thing that I possibly left out, was established in 2015 in Russia. And that is why I was saying it is definitely not new. It's just that I think the approach that we took as South Africa will maybe become a norm in BRICS, to make sure that the Parliamentary Forum actually has an individual kind of approach to do also have the forum, not maybe at the level of the heads of state, but at the level of where parliaments can take it to. So this is new, it's groundbreaking, and I believe that we will get more out of it. And we used to speak about the fourth industrial revolution, and in terms of innovation, research and other things, there is a lot that South Africans can benefit from the agreements with the BRICS.
Okay.
Upon this view, already in the agreements that South Africa has with China, for example, mentioning around the information communication technology, there's already practical, what is it called?
Huawei.
Yes, that has already assisted our country to expand its ICT infrastructure, but also importantly, learning, teaching young South Africans the language that will enable us to handle tourists when they come to South Africa, so that you are able, the tour guides that do that brings jobs to people without jobs. And this is huge in every country. They want to come to South Africa, but they want to be able to be here. Brazilian speaks Portuguese,
Spanish.
And so those practical issues come from the agreements reached in the BRICS context of the relationship between the countries. For us as Africans, there's the Africa Free Trade Agreement that seeks to bring integration in the continent, that the SADC region, for example, the east, the west part of the regions in the continent must be integrated from a trade perspective. So the ability to build infrastructure that will enable us to do this kind of work is an important part of the benefits that will accrue to ordinary citizens in the African continent with support from the big BRICS countries. This is why we do not only act as South Africa as part of BRICS, but we always insist that it is South Africa and the rest of the continent.
Okay, thank you so much for that very expansive explanation on how ordinary South Africans can benefit from this. What is it that South Africans, how they stand to benefit from this structure of the BRICS Parliamentary Forum. Now, looking at the theme of this forum, this meeting that's taking place, which is harnessing multilateralism and parliamentary diplomacy with the aim to deepen BRICS and Africa partnership for accelerated implementation of the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which you just mentioned now. So how does this ninth, which is the ninth, because you said it started in 2015, how does this ninth BRICS Parliamentary Forum aim to harness the collective progress of the member states?
Okay, the first important indication is that we plan this meeting of parliaments in advance.
Yeah.
So we request contributions to what the agenda should be. An agreement has been reached that during this ninth BRICS Parliamentary Forum, there are 4 themes that are going to be discussed so that we get to hear the views of the different countries on those themes. One of them, to start with, is peace and security, which is an absolute problem, as we say that in what they are going to suggest in the African continent, West Africa is troubled by coups and other battles there. And how we resolve them is very important, to work together in West Africa, but in West Africa with the rest of the African continent, and contributions from other countries on building peace and so on. But also there are problems of energy that are on the agenda. Energy is a big problem as a result of the war in Ukraine and Russia. And the idea of bringing about peace is also an important part of a contribution that some of the participants in this forum will tell us about what they are doing to help increase energy availability in every region of the 4 countries, so to speak. So that's an important part of some of the things that we are going to be discussing. We have sourced them from each of these countries, so that's what is going to be on the agenda for discussion. There are other topics, 2 other topics that we can talk about later.
Yeah. Now looking at the Africa Free Trade Agreement and the BRICS countries, now that South Africa is the only country, an African country that is a member of BRICS. So how is that the Africa Free Trade Agreement basically relevant to this structure, to the discussions of this structure?
It's the condition we set. South Africa participates, and it talks about multilateralism.
Yeah.
In other words, we do not agree with the view of only having bilaterals, especially with big powers that often influences us one way or another, that we are better off with strength of our numbers in participating in these structures. We as South Africa prioritize an agenda we contributed towards its building, Agenda 2063 of the African Union. So in our participation, we have also invited these countries to be observers, to be present here. Okay. They are here, they are going to be present here. The leadership of many of the speakers, for example, of these countries are going to be here in the next 2 days. The reports that arise from here will be shared with the AU at the appropriate forums, so that the rest of the African continent, for example, understand what we did in the 9th forum to advance the Africa Free Trade Agreement.
Okay, you wanted to add something before I ask the question?
You can ask, then we can.
No, I wanted to say that also you had also mentioned that agreements are signed treaties. Is there any treaty or agreement that is expected to be signed during the meeting over the 2 days?
First of all, there is a memorandum of understanding that will be updated, and that will be then signed by the current members of the BRICS Parliamentary Forum. Because I think it is something that was in discussion and it is not new. So that is why they are going to update it, and then it will be signed on the second day of this specific parliamentary forum. But I wanted to come back to the issue of how is this going to benefit
Africa as a
this
whole.
Africa as a whole. First of all, this theme that we are using is a follow-through of what the heads of state forum have been doing, and there will be a debate on the resolutions or some of the programmatic areas, and that is what's mentioned by the deputy speaker. So African countries, I don't know whether you have noticed when the Brics heads of state was sitting, there were so many African countries, not necessarily members of the Brics, but they have attended because they've got an interest. And I should say, in my engagement currently that I've been experiencing now, is that Africa is rich in natural resources.
Yeah.
The issue is that why are we still an underdeveloped country? And I think through this engagement with not Western countries, but with the BRICS countries, or countries that is more developed than ourselves, like India, for instance. And then there is a lot for Africa to benefit. But there is also a lot for these countries to benefit from Africa. Because if you look at some of the countries, they don't have, I'm speaking now about Western countries, they don't have any mineral resources, but they've got gold reserves and others coming, particularly, the Deputy Speaker was speaking about West Africa, particularly from West Africa. Countries like Mali, that is now conflict-ridden. But they are the countries that are having gold, that are having all the different mineral resources. So this free trade agreement, in actual fact, Africa is a resource with more than 1 billion people in Africa. Imagine if there is a trade between South Africa and the rest of Africa, or as we come as a pact and we are approaching these other countries. You are speaking from a position of power. You are speaking from a position of having the majority of resource, that is the human resource. And how do you develop the human resource? How do you develop the natural resources that you have? So in this kind of agreements that you are having through this Africa Free Trade Agreement, it might, because of where we are now, currently, from where we are moving, from the basis that it might seem insignificant, but it is very significant. And particularly, as I said, in terms of population, we've got the human resource that, if developed, can become a formidable force. We've got the natural resources, if developed and utilized correctly, it can become a formidable resource. We as the parliaments have got the responsibility to make sure that when we ask our government to account to Parliament, we make sure that we address these issues and bring up the kind of, we can take resolutions here, but how do we make sure that it actually find kind of expression?
Yeah.
So that is why it is so important that in the context of what we are going to discuss here, we make sure that the resolutions going from here, we get buy-in from all our governments to make sure that there is implementation of the things that we discuss and that we decide on.
Okay, what would you say are some of the challenges that we face in implementing some of the agreements that are made over the years?
I think we've made progress in the African continent with issues like democracy. Because, I mean, in most instances, you find that, or let me speak from another perspective. The perspective of the colonial kind of powers that is in many instances determining the agenda for some of our African countries. For instance, where is Niger? I'm just mentioning an example. Where is Niger? And in Niger there was some kind of violence or turmoil, and all of a sudden here we hear France say, I am withdrawing my troops from Niger because Niger is not fighting terrorism. What is France doing in Niger in the first instance? We need African solutions for African challenges. You understand where I'm coming from? So some of the challenges is that there is we don't have a focus. And the focus, if I speak about focus, we need to have focus programs in terms of making sure that Africa is not a continent of poverty.
Whilst
we have a sea of richness, whilst we have all the, if you look, for instance, I'm speaking about, let me say, Zambia. Say, we've got this different kind of minerals. But in terms of exploration, only 30% have been achieved. I mean, with all the different minerals that you find, the copper and all the different minerals that you find in Zambia. So why is it that they can say only 30% of exploration is being achieved? Would it not be very good if we have that kind of agreement that we assist each other, like the same way that we want to get this kind of input from the side of the BRICS countries? We assist one another to make sure that we bring in, and that is why what my colleague have also mentioned, the issue of the BRICS Business Forum is so important, because we don't want to suppress private business development, but we also want to make sure that there is a balance, that there is a social development that is going with the economic development of the different countries. I've mentioned Zambia as an example, because we find all the different kind of minerals there. Mali, for instance, doesn't have any gold reserves, but Mali has got gold mines. So where is the gold of Mali? You understand what I'm saying? So if we speak about Africa, there is so much that we can say, and there is so much that we can do as a parliament to push our government also, and our governments as parliaments, to make sure that they begin to respond to the social and economic needs of our people with the resources that is available, but also with the assistance of development that we can get from our partners.
Okay.
Can I just say that your question was what often gets into the way of implementation. Already South Africa with other countries and in the African continent, there are agreements that are already under implementation. We were just giving you examples here about agreements in human resource development, which we are already underway for implementation and so on. I'm laughing because I know someone specifically who's in China as part of this program. He's learning, he's doing his master's there and so on. So there are a number of programs of implementation that are underway. But the most important thing is that many of the jobs in our own country, as a result of this trade agreement with the markets that are opening in the BRICS countries, jobs are retained. This is one of the most important strategies of our economic program, is that we help companies develop and grow, and as they expand into the BRICS countries, the jobs are kept, but importantly, they grow as well, because as business grows in the huge 1.4 billion Chinese market, as an example, and we have a 10-year strategic partnership with them as part of this BRICS agreement as well, that as opportunities to build agricultural progress, for example, some of those numbers are frequently cited as part of the reason why we have survived with some job creation, however limited. It is because of the expansion of this program. What BRICS is also doing, and in the theme that it chooses of multilateral, is that we should also collaborate as BRICS when we go to the United Nations, when we go to the Security Council, when we interact with the IMF and so on. And there are billions of rand that the BRICS Bank that is located in South Africa has already contributed to give us resources at reasonable interest so that we build our economy. There are very practical stories like those that are available and so on. That we are hosting that bank here is not only an important one for job creation of employing locals with specific skills, but the public resources that are available to us, other than in other situations with what do you call it, conditionalities and so on, is the value that we benefit as a country.
If you have just joined us, viewers at home, welcome to the show. And this is a special broadcast of Parliament, and we are coming to you live from the Emperor's Palace in Kempton Park, where final arrangements for the BRICS Parliamentary Forum meetings are being finalized. I'm here chatting with the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Mr. Lechisa Tsenodi, and the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Ms. Sylvia Lucas. Parliament from tomorrow will be hosting heads of parliaments of all BRICS nations, which are Brazil, Russia, India, and China, including the newly added member states such as Iran, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt. Your invitations, you did mention that there are other African countries that you've invited, and now you've got new member states who want to join BRICS, who have expressed their interest in joining BRICS. So who else can we expect to see attending tomorrow?
Well, the reports we got is that firstly the BRICS countries themselves will be here, but the other countries such as Iran and others are already in the country.
Wow.
They are already somewhere around here. And the United Arab Emirates are going to be here as well. And so but the important thing is that those who have expressed interest to join and may have been indicated to that they'll be agreed to, that will only happen in January next year. That's the only time they'll have full membership. But in the meantime, they have chosen to come to be part of the discussions, so that they hear. What is special about our hosting BRIC, as the Deputy Chair explained, is that when the heads of state meeting takes place, the media has interest only in them. So when we hold functions alongside that, you don't get the appropriate attention to deal with the issues that arises from an oversight perspective and follow-through perspective, because that's what we are interested in. We want to understand what has been agreed to, and this that has been agreed to, what additional strategies can we implement to ensure it takes place. The memorandum the Deputy Chair refers to is what we proposed when BRICS when we chaired BRICS the last time we did so. And so, because these are new geopolitical formations, it took a bit of time before there was understanding of how it would operate and so on. So some of the initial reticence related to firstly understanding how all of us can work together effectively in a machinery such as we're creating, such as BRICS. So we think that time that has elapsed now has enabled us to be possibly getting to an agreement to sign of that memorandum of understanding, which is basically a framework for cooperation.
Okay.
And so over time, it might even take deeper forms. You would have heard, even for the bigger BRICS, by bigger meaning the executive version, there was a question of trading together using our own currencies, excluding the dollar. And part of the reason for doing that is also from a democratic and governance perspective, that international relations must be run in a democratic manner without any one of us using any authority we have over currency or over any other thing that we are dependent on them for to manipulate decisions. That literally kills democracy. It's on the subject. It will be explored further over a period of time, but it's on the agenda, and it is likely to lessen the concerns many countries have, including those who are coming. That's partly one of the concerns they have. They think that the global governance is run in a very undemocratic, politically manipulative manner, and that those concerns as being expressed needs to be attended to. Our intention is to do our homework so that when that time comes for us to go that route, we are ready.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add on what the Deputy Speaker was speaking about, the issue of how through this kind of multilateralism that we have seen, how undemocratic practices is coming into play, but also how the world order is becoming more polarized by the day because of the way that the bigger kind of countries, or sometimes we call it the West, but the bigger kind of countries is actually handling the affairs. If it comes to the smaller or the developing, let me call the developing countries. So the issue is that you find that there is more and more polarization, there is more and more fights. And also, for instance, if you can, there was a big cry out for a long time about the Russia-Ukraine issue. But in my experience and where I was, it was clear that there is like a one-sided approach of making sure that if I decide that I am standing on the side of this one, I'm standing on the side of this one, not speaking about the issues that give rise to the kind of polarization that we are experiencing around the world. And so that is why it is becoming more of a problem if you look at it. I just wanted to mention something. I'm also smiling now when I say that. I was in Russia recently, and in Russia they trade inside Russia they trade with the ruble. We couldn't use our MasterCards or our Visa cards. We couldn't use them because they have taken a kind of a resolution that whoever comes to Russia must use the local currency. So that debate is not something that they are just putting on the table for the world to see. It is in actual fact something that is implemented within their own country. So they put their money where their mouth is. So it is important that sometimes when we hear things, it becomes a slogan, but it's not necessarily a slogan. When the Russian Federation is raising this issue, they are actually very serious. That if you want to trade with Russia, you trade in my own currency. So, and that is the kind of push that should come sometimes, because the South African rand will forever remain weaker because of the dynamics that is at play around trade. So that is why if sometimes you go deeper into the kind of proposals, you might find that it is actually making a lot of sense. Although people would say that, but we've been used to trading in the dollar and whatever. But we've got oil, UAE have got oil, Russia have got all of these minerals, South Africa have got all of these minerals. In fact, why is South African rand not backed by gold or platinum? It's just something that I mentioned in passing.
The Deputy Chair and the Deputy Speaker, I'm wishing you fruitful engagements and a successful hosting of the Brics Parliamentary Forum, which is scheduled to start tomorrow. And we're looking forward also to coming back again to discuss what are the outcomes of this, just as much as we talked about what is it that we expect. It would be nice to also again come back to South Africans to talk to them and inform them of what are the decisions that came out of the Brics Parliament, the 9th Brics Parliamentary Forum. Thank you very much for your time and all the information that you provided to our fellow South Africans. To our listeners, please make sure you watch the special broadcast of the Brics Parliamentary Forum meetings on Parliament TV on DSTV channel 408 from 9 a.m. tomorrow and all Parliament's social media platforms. Special thanks to all our listeners across the country, especially those who participated. Well, we didn't get any WhatsApp messages anyway. We wish that in future, when we come back to come and talk to them about, we'll be able to point a reference to, have a reference to say, when you were here, you said this. So how far are you with what you had said will happen at the 9th Brics Parliamentary Forum? And a big thank you to all the community radio stations which carried our live broadcast. And this platform is for all South Africans to engage and to engage with their parliamentarians and to keep abreast of what is happening in the national legislature. My name is Masego Lula. Until we meet again, good night.
You should have said on our behalf.
Good night on behalf of all of us.